With 15 seconds left on the clock, with the entire world watching, with Germany's World Cup destiny hanging in the balance, one can only imagine, as Toni Kroos told Marco Reus in a confidence-filled adrenaline rush, that he would ignore his teammates in the box and shoot this last free kick directly at goal. And Reus, under the spell of Tony's charisma, agreed to be his partner in crime. This behavior is not a coincidence. Even against Mexico, with the entire team rushing forward, Tony was Germany's one-man midfield. He was their most offensive midfielder, their playmaker, and even tried to be the goal scorer, with more shots than anyone else on the pitch. And against Sweden, Tony recovered from his mistake in the first half and tried to do everything once again. He finished the match with 113 passes, 2 key passes, 8 duels won, 3 tackles, 3 dribbles, 4 shots, and unlike the Mexico match, with 1 astounding goal. Over the last 4 years, Tony has changed. He is not just the key tactical player, the one who gives structure or who makes his teammates play well. After 4 years of playing in a historic constellation of Real Madrid stars, Tony has become an undisputed star himself. He is now one of Germany's match deciders, the one who will win the game no matter how badly his team played or how bad were his own prior mistakes. The one who leaves us fans with the most memorable moments, the moments we want to talk about in another episode of the Football Engineer Podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to the Football Engineer Podcast. I'm your host Jose, and today we're going to talk about Matchday 10, the matches that happened on June 23rd. So I'd like to begin by saying that, as I mentioned yesterday, I am skipping Matchday number 9, June 22nd. Those are the matches for Group E, Brazil, Serbia, Costa Rica, Switzerland, and so on. I simply don't have time to catch up on them, which is a bit of a shame because I wanted to talk a bit, for example, about the Neymar issue, which apparently is showing up in Brazil. Neymar doesn't seem to be well. I mean, he always had the individualism issue, but he doesn't seem to be physically well. And those are bad news for him, for Brazil, and for Brazil's World Cup chances in general. So we'll have to see how Brazil handles that. And another announcement that I'd like to make is that I am not sure whether tomorrow we're going to have a podcast. I have an event in the afternoon that could get extended, and if I arrive too late from that, there's a good chance that I won't be able to record. And because on Monday, all of the group finales start, I simply wouldn't have time to catch up on tomorrow's matches on Matchday 11. So yes, there's a chance that there won't be a podcast for Matchday 11. I'll keep you updated on that. And now we can go and talk actually about what happened in today's Matchday, in Matchday 10. It was very exciting. I really like the matches. I think they gave me a lot of good ideas and a lot of good points that I'd really like to talk about. And they were good matches. They make me pumped to keep talking about football. And we are going to start with the first match, and this one from Group G. Belgium versus Tunisia. Getting into this Belgium versus Tunisia game, well, to be honest, I didn't watch the first half. I only watched the second one, but I literally just needed 10 seconds of watching the game on the TV to figure out what the problem and what the story of the game was. It was Tunisia using their high pressing system once again, and once again, that being a bad idea. So what happened against England? Tunisia used the high press. It didn't work out during the first half because it was clear that they were conceding too many spaces to England, And during the second half, Tunisia shifted to a more conservative strategy, to a conservative defensive low block. And that closed down the spaces for England and made it more difficult for them to score. So it seemed that Tunisia had learned the lesson from that. Don't use the high press, but they used it against Belgium, and I found that genuinely shocking. And I understand why they do it. It allows them to create really beautiful attacking football and effective attacking football. It allowed them to create great possessions in Belgium's half because Tunisia has good players on the ball that can do that, and it allowed them to create more chances and score more goals. The problem is that when you're facing a world power like Belgium, using that strategy and trading punches with them, then that means that your opponent that is superior to you is going to end up scoring even more goals than you are. And that leads me to talk about the context of national teams and what is the right tactic when you are an inferior team. I think that national team contexts favor defensive low blocks. Why? Because in national teams, you have relatively little time to work with the team and create a great collective structure. And the low blocks are the less difficult defensive structure to make. You can probably get a decent low block in less time. That's number one. And number two, that defensive low block is actually hard to break down for your opponents. Because in order to break down a low block, the attacking team also needs to have a good collective organization. And we already said that's more difficult in the national team context. So I think national teams do favor, when they're inferior teams, they do favor the defensive low block. There is an advantage there. And it's kind of surprising that Tunisia saw the advantage against England and didn't use it against Belgium. And they played right into Belgium's counter-attacking game. Belgium is a team that is, despite trying to make good possessions, they are more comfortable on the counter. So Tunisia played right into Belgium's hands, and they conceded spaces in which the Belgian attackers did whatever they wanted. Again, Hazard, Kevin De Bruyne, Mertens are really good at creating chances. Lukaku is good at taking advantage of those chances. Which leads me to the discussion also of how well Lukaku is doing. I am a bit surprised because I didn't expect that much from Lukaku in this tournament. I had doubts whether he could really deliver the goods in a tournament of this caliber, and he's doing it, and he's building up confidence. And that's great for him now that we're going into the knockout stages, because then his confidence is going to be at full throttle when we get to the knockout stages. His movements are getting sharper. His finishing is getting sharper. And that's great news for him, great news for Belgium. That being said, because Tunisia created such a favorable context for Belgium to attack, I am not sure that we can be that optimistic about Belgium's potential as a World Cup candidate. Or to be more precise, I don't think this match changes my opinion of Belgium's potential, because I don't think that Belgium played better than usual in this game. I just think that they were conceded more spaces. But again, I think there are very positive conclusions out of the game, like, for example, Lukaku and the rest of the team, really, like Hazard or like Batshuayi, building up confidence. But the issues that have been present in Belgium for a while are still there. Like, for example, that manager Roberto Martinez wants them to play a possession game, but the attackers are more comfortable in a counter-attacking game. There's also the issue that the defense actually doesn't like the counter-attacking game. They don't like to sit back and wait. And as we saw in the match against Tunisia, once Tunisia got in Belgium's face, the defense wasn't handling it in the best way. So Belgium's defense would like a more proactive style, while Belgium's attack would prefer a more reactive style. So there are some fundamental contradictions in Belgium. And again, these things might not become so apparent against an inferior team like Tunisia that they can outscore, but we will definitely see them once Belgium starts facing opponents of similar quality. For example, Will Belgium's defense not suffer against opponents like Spain or Germany? They will. So I am very interested in watching the group finale for the Belgium versus England game, because it's going to be our first hint of just how good this Belgium project of Roberto Martinez really is. And talking about good projects, it's time to talk about Mexico, who had a great game against South Korea. Alright, going into the Mexico versus South Korea game, which Mexico won by 2-0. I think there's a huge merit to this Mexico victory because they were using almost exactly the same lineup as they did against Germany, but they were playing with the completely opposite strategy. Against Germany, they were the counter-attacking team, but against South Korea, they were the possession team, and they won in this case. This just shows just how good the work of manager Juan Carlos Osorio has been with Mexico. It shows that the tactical experiments and the rotations are paying off, and that Mexico's players are actually proficient at several systems, and this is coming in very handy for the World Cup. Now, before talking more about Mexico, I'd like to go and talk about South Korea's counter-attacking system. Again, Mexico was the possession team here, South Korea was the counter-attacking team here. They were using an organized 4-4-2 and try to mix up a bit of a conservative low block with a bit of pressing, but I don't think it worked particularly well for them. I don't think it was really well executed, and I don't think it was really effective at stifling Mexico's possession game. So, in general, South Korea's defense was good, decent, not great. And their offensive game wasn't really good at all. The feeling I get when I watch South Korea is that it's too stiff, too rigid. The players seem to be in fixed positions, and they don't want to move out of those positions to exchange passes with each other. And I know this seems to be like a very common and almost stereotypical criticism of East Asian teams, but Japan has actually advanced leaps and bounds over that. If you saw Japan's possession game against Colombia, it was excellent. You had the players switching positions, moving to exchange passes with the other, and they did a lot of damage against Colombia that way. They handled themselves really well on the ball, and that's not the feeling I get when I see South Korea. I just feel that they are too rigid. The players in South Korea who are really carrying the team are their best players. It's their midfield director, Song Yong-ki from Swansea City, and of course, in the attack, we had Hong Min-son from Tottenham, who had truly an amazing game. He single-handedly made South Korea's counterattack look dangerous when it really wasn't. And his stats are amazing. He had the most shots in his team. He had the most key passes in his team. He had the most dribbles. In other words, a complete attacking performance done at a world-class level. He single-handedly makes South Korea look dangerous when it really wasn't that dangerous. Now, going into Mexico and talking about their possession game, that is always a joy to watch. As I said, the work that Juan Carlos Osorio has done with them is excellent. I think it did a good job breaking down South Korea's defense. We have the usual. We have Guardado organizing the attacks. We have their Héctor Herrera, who really is such a smart midfielder. He's a smart midfielder on the ball with his passing. He's a smart midfielder off the ball, always making movements off the ball and to keep moving his team forward. He passes the ball to Guardado, then moves forward, then Guardado passes to him, and that keeps moving Mexico's possession game forward. And Herrera always has great performances with the national team. And then you had Carlos Vela, who is doing a great job being the playmaker in the final third, making the decisive passes, giving a bit of pause to the attack. He's having a great World Cup. And of course, all of this is crowned by the sharp, aggressive, incisive attackers at the front, which are Chicharito Hernandez and Lozano. And again, Lozano, as we already know from the Germany game, is having a great tournament. His movements, his technique, all of this in a similar way to what Son does with South Korea, they put Mexico's attack on a higher level. That being said, in the game against South Korea, I thought Lozano's finishing was a bit off compared to the Germany game. But fortunately, Chicharito's finishing wasn't, and he actually did a very similar finish and goal to the one that Lozano did against Germany. Hopefully, Chicharito can maintain sort of this level of precision, because Mexico's attack would really benefit from having both Lozano and Chicharito in top form. And I'd also like to comment that even if I think that Mexico's possession game is really good, they've been looking more comfortable on the counter. Again, their goal against South Korea, their second goal, was actually on the counter. And it was very similar in structure to the Germany goal. And perhaps this seeming comfort with the counter-attacking game probably has to do with the verticality of Lozano and Chicharito, who usually prefer those open spaces of counter-attacking situations. And finally, I'd just like to give a shout out to what Mexico and Osorio are doing with Rafa Márquez and his second half cameos as a substitute, which I absolutely love. If you are too young, because I guess I'm getting that old, and you don't know who Rafa Márquez is, Rafa Márquez he still is a Mexican, the greatest defender in Mexico's history, really, one of the best Mexican players in history. He played in Barcelona for 7 years. He played even in Pep Guardiola's Barça. And what he's known for is for being an excellent defender on the ball. Right now, he's 40 years of age and still playing for the national team. This is his 5th World Cup appearance. It's a record. And I love to watch him play on the ball as always. Of course, he's getting older. Osorio wouldn't use him as a central defender, as a center back, because he's not fast enough, but he's substituting him in the second half as a holding midfielder, as a way to close games, to add some composure and more passing to Mexico's midfield, slow down the tempo, and just have someone with good defensive positioning. And I really love those cameos. It's great to see Rafa Márquez play, even at 40. That just makes it even better, actually. And talking about better and great, we have the final amazing match of the match day, which was Germany versus Sweden. And finally, going into the big bomb of Group F, Germany barely scraping a victory against Sweden to remain alive in the group. It was bad for Germany, but this was great for football fans. It was gripping, it had drama, it had a great climax, it had good teams, good players. Again, this is what we watch the World Cup for. But first, I'd like to begin by talking a bit about the quality of the chances that both teams created, because Germany might have produced more than twice as many chances and shots as Sweden did, but surprisingly, Sweden has around the same expected goals as Germany has, and that means that maybe Sweden created significantly less chances, but each one of those chances was better. It's quality over quantity, and that says a lot about the good tactical work that Sweden does, about their players, and about their competitive mentality, which I'm going to get back later. So, talking about Germany, the big thing was that their defensive issues are still there, and Löw tried to fix this by using Sebastian Rudi instead of Khedira to guard the team's defensive transition, and also to take a bit of defensive workload from Toni Kroos, but it still didn't work. They still, in the first 20 minutes of the game, they got dangerous counterattacks from Sweden, including the one that ended up in the penalty that was somehow not caught by VAR. And that was a problem. It means that Germany's problem, it cannot be solved only with a single substitution or change or by a single player. This is a system level issue that will probably force Joachim Löw to start thinking about why is this happening in general and as a team? Why is everyone going all out? Why are we going so all out and exposing our defense so much? Because, to be honest, the center backs, Hummels, Rudiger, and Boateng, none of them are playing particularly well. But the system, of course, doesn't help them at all. It exposes them too much and forces them to make like those heroic last-ditch interventions that ended up with Boateng being sent off. Again, the system doesn't help here. And the worst part about this is that you sacrifice defense for an all-out attack that doesn't work that well because Germany's attackers also have some issues. And the biggest worry here is Thomas Müller, who didn't play well in this game. And it's getting worrying because Müller is one of Germany's great match deciders in World Cups, and right now, he's not there. You see his off-the-ball movement and his energy to attack spaces. It's not the same as usual. And even more worrying was that time, especially during the second half, when you see him outside the box, trying to make crosses into the box, and then you're wondering, Müller, shouldn't you be inside the box, which is where you're usually at your best? Shouldn't you be the one receiving the crosses rather than the ones making the crosses? So I'm a bit surprised in general by Müller's behavior, but who knows? It's Müller. He might just end up showing in the knockout stages, and that would be a very Müller thing to do. Löw improved Germany's attack during the second half. I think a key change there was the entire move of Mario Gomez for Draxler, and Mario Gomez became the fixed center forward in the box. Timo Werner was moved to the left wing and used as sort of a fast, incisive, aggressive left winger who tried to make a pass into Gomez and find him. He was one of Germany's key players in this match. Werner produced the assist for the first goal that Royce slotted in, and the foul on him at the end of the game is what produced the second goal. Key player here. And this also reminds me, if Löw wanted to use Timo Werner as a fast, incisive left wing with good 1-versus-1 capabilities, doesn't this sound a bit like Leroy Sané? So are we figuring out that maybe Germany really did need a player profile like Sané, but they didn't call him? So that's a bit of a weird thing. But even though I criticize Löw, I must say that he did a great job in this game despite the defensive issues of his team. Because, first of all, he tried to make several changes in the starting lineup to fix the issues. They didn't work out as well as expected, and then in the second half, he kept doing more changes, for example, to improve Germany's attack. And again, that move with Mario Gomez and Timo Werner on the left worked beautifully. So, very good game management, honestly, from Löw, despite the defensive issues of his team. And now, it's finally time to talk about Toni Kroos, who, of course, we have his first half mistake, which was bad, and it was a double mistake. It was him missing the pass that led to the Swedish counterattack, but then the entire part of marking Toivonen and doing the handover of the marking to Rudiger, that was another mistake. But again, he recovered. He had a massive performance in the second half, a heroic performance that, similar to the Mexico game, started accumulating a lot of ridiculous defensive and offensive stats. Again, Toni Kroos was sort of the holding midfielder, the playmaker, and the guy who was also doing the shots and trying to score the goals. It was everything, and that's how we ended up with those insane stats that I mentioned at the opening. 113 passes, 2 key passes, 8 duels won, 3 tackles, 3 dribbles, 4 shots, and 1 goal. And all of this is, of course, a great sign for Kroos' confidence, but it's not that great for Germany because it means that they are demanding way too much from him, and that is a result of collective deficits. Germany needs to find a good midfielder, someone like Rudy, who unfortunately had to go out early, and who can actually take off some defensive workload from Toni Kroos and actually allow Kroos to be that match decider that we started to see against Mexico, and that he scored the goal here against Sweden. Allow Kroos to have that more offensive game, because it's quite amazing. I mean, Kroos actually has accumulated 10 shots in the last 2 games. These are kinds of shot statistics that Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar try to accumulate. Again, he is becoming Germany's match decider, and that's vital right now that, for example, Müller doesn't seem to be there. So Germany has to build around Kroos and allow him to do that, to be the match decider, and that requires having a more defensive midfielder who can take some workload off him. And again, that defensive midfielder would also help with the defensive transition and to not expose the central defender so much. But again, as I said in the beginning, even with that, Germany has to look about their attacking as a whole and try to find a more controlled approach to the attack that doesn't expose the entire team. And finally, I'd like to talk a bit about Sweden, that perhaps the spotlight kind of shifted away from them right at the very end, but they did an amazing game and they are an amazing team. I mean, let's look at Sweden's story. These guys survived a World Cup qualifying group with Netherlands and France, and then they went to eliminate Italy in the World Cup qualifying playoff. And these guys were practically 15 seconds away from almost knocking Germany out of the tournament. Again, their composure and mentality has become top-notch. Over the last 2 years, they've been exposed to really complicated, high-stakes matches, and they are doing really well in that aspect. And of course, Sweden didn't have the quality or the playing style to dominate the game for a lot of time, but their counterattacks, as I said, were especially dangerous and created great chances for Sweden. Their set-piece game was solid, including, for example, that set piece that required a massive save by Neuer at the end of the first half. Their off-the-ball organization and pressing was good, and it induced mistakes in Germany's build-up, like what happened with Kroos, like what happened also at the beginning with Rudiger. And in this context, we should also praise how effective the front two, Berg and Toivonen, were at making the most out of those counterattacking chances. But I think the Swedish player that called my attention the most was, of course, Emil Forsberg from RB Leipzig. He was sort of the key man in attack, leading, creating the counterattacks. And for example, especially in the second half where Sweden were very asphyxiated by the German pressing and attack and by Germany throwing their entire team at them. In those situations, sometimes you saw Forsberg take the ball and actually dribble past German attackers and midfielders. And those little runs that moved Sweden forward gave them a bit of oxygen when they were being asphyxiated by Germany. And those are heroic performances. And it was that, and it was the way he handled himself in general in Sweden's counterattack, with his dribbling, with his good final passing, with his pass, with his creativity. Emil Forsberg is a great player, and we are seeing great performances from him in this World Cup. And again, this was a great, dramatic, gripping match with two great teams despite their defects, with good coaching, with well-defined game plans, with two teams with outstanding competitive mentalities. This was a great game, and the best thing is that it's not over yet. We still have to watch that insane finale for Group F, in which literally everyone, including Korea, can still qualify. So it's gonna be a great TV to watch, and again, more great World Cup to watch. And on this note, I'd like to finish the podcast for now. As always, thank you very much for listening. And of course, I'd like to tell you, follow me on Twitter for the mini match reviews. Keep following the YouTube channel. Right now, the podcast, we already have the podcast in Google Play Music and in iTunes. Hopefully we'll get it on Spotify soon so that you can listen to this on your favorite platforms and music systems and the like. And again, thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you hopefully tomorrow, and if not, on Monday.